Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure for you guys, for us to be hosting another clinic here with MSL Capita. And as we get started today, we're going to be talking about connecting our organizations to industry partners and how to do that. So again, my name is Davis Turner, and I'm the Senior Director at MindSpark Learning. And we're joined here by Tim Cronin, who's wonderful, and we're super excited to have here with us today. Tim, if you don't mind introducing yourself and your background and why you're here.
Sure. For the past year and a half, first of all, thank you, Davis, and thanks for allowing me to be here. For the past year and a half, I've had the honor and privilege of being able to work with MindSpark Learning and Capita in particular. And I bring to it, I think, maybe a unique experience because I started out as a coach. I started out as a teacher my first 7.5 years after college. And then I left that and I went into the sporting goods industry with several high-level, very well-known brands, and ended up my career for the last 15 years in the men's fashion industry. So a lot of things that we're talking about today in terms of team building and organization and structure are things that I've had the chance to implement, and I'm happy to share my expertise with this group.
Yeah, I love it, and I can't wait to get into this conversation because it's exciting and it kind of is very versatile and especially needed right now after what we've been through in this last year or so. So again, MSL Capita is really here to help you as a coach, right? We're not necessarily here for anybody else besides you and your organization and how to really create the largest impact that we can for you and your organization. So, and that includes all stakeholders. And that's, as a coach, you're kind of the face of that organization. You're kind of the face of the team, and how that culture looks is reflected back on you and what you're doing to increase that and really make a difference. So kind of for that next section, or this next kind of first attempt, is I want you to pitch your organization. I'll give you about a minute to pitch your organization, and you can either put that in the chat or you can turn your microphone on and we'll kind of have that conversation. But you have 1 minute to pitch your organization. Tell us what it's about, why you exist, and what you're here for. So that was great. I'm glad that we got to hear some of those organizations and those pitches and everything. It's really unique to see all the different variances out there, and kind of your organization and where you're at and how you kind of reflected it on some other people's. And I can see that some people were inspired by other people's sayings and their ideas, but really it's about you and your kind of clients and your stakeholders. So make sure that when you think about today, you're really focusing on how you can create your vision and your passion and your kind of motion all in the same trajectory, all in the same kind of throughout the entire organization. How can you create that consistent message? So one thing that I found, and you noticed this in some of our marketing before, is 38% of programs say they can't survive 3 months or can survive only 3 months at most without further assistance and without further supplementation and support. So that's pretty incredible, right? It's shocking to me that we, as organizations, we lack that sustainability. And I think over this course of this year, it's going to change because we're going to see that this was needed in case something like this ever were to happen again. But at the same time, we're not treating our partnerships, we're not creating these partners that are long lasting, creating these sustainable donors or these partnerships that are going to last. So when we start thinking about this aspect of it, we want to start thinking about how organizations are like business and how businesses are like people, and those relationships do matter. And we need to continue to nurture them. We need to continue to loop them in our conversations, and we need to continue to say, what do I need? What can I get from you? How can I be supportive of you? And then what are we doing for the communities? What are we doing for, not only ourselves and our clients and our student athletes, but what are we doing for the communities that are there supporting us? How can we give back beyond just offering them a place to play, offering them a field or a court or a rink or a mountain, whatever it is? It's something that we need to really look into and to create that buy-in from the rest of the community.
Davis, do you think it's important that that the coaches and their activities, that they continue to promote those activities in the community? How does that, in order to get that support, what's the proactive steps that coaches and leaders can take?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we do or that we see a lot of is like try this sport or jump in, and I think the outreach, not isn't always there, right? We don't go out into community parks or organizations, but like, hey, let's pick up this game of basketball, or this, you can join our teams over here. How are we creating and almost incentivizing to join new sports, right? There's, try hockey for free that USA Hockey puts on, and they give all the equipment to these young athletes to try out. They have, soccer drop-in times where it's free for everybody, under 12 that has never played before, and they just jump into kind of some pickup games. And so there's all these different opportunities for people to come in and see what you're about. But when you go to, a basketball court, or you go to these, rinks or football field houses, you don't necessarily always feel welcomed, right? How are we creating that and promoting that welcome atmosphere to bring stakeholders and to bring other people in to see what you're doing? Because that's what's going to get people to see the benefits that you're bringing to the table and to the community. So I think the more that we allow people to come in, and the more that we go out as an organization to recruit and to retain and to build off, some of the things that we've already been doing, that's where we're going to start building those relationships. That's when we're going to see those people really engaged, being like, oh, this is great. This seems like a family. This seems like something I want to be a part of, right? It's not necessarily an exclusive piece where you have to have this much money or this kind of equipment to play or this type of standard. You're out there reaching to, everybody, right? You're trying to make things accessible to them, because we don't want a barrier of access to the sport that you're trying to engage them in. Right? We want to kind of taking down those barriers. We want to bring down those walls so everybody has that news perspective and has that diverse attitude, and really bring our sport to a diverse audience. That's one of those ways that not only can we bring in new athletes, but bring in new partners as well, to see really what's happening in the community that they may not be a part of or may not have any knowledge of. That's a great question, Tim. Thank you. So one of the things that I do want to specify too is partners and donors, right? They're two very and vastly different things. And I think we oftentimes get those terms confused, right? There's partnership is a very separate conversation from money. And we really need to develop partnerships to be a two-way street, right? It's not just, I'm going to provide you with something, or they're not going to just provide us with a monetary thing. It is a two-way street. So, inviting partnerships, and they happen through authentic work, right? It also comes through time and expertise from your organization, your company, whatever. What's in it for them? And really, we have to create that two-way street in the sense of saying, if I can provide you this, then you can provide me this, and vice versa, right? It's not necessarily you just give me money to do what I'm doing, because that's not a partnership. Right? That doesn't exist in the real world, and that's more of that donor piece. But donors often want to see tangible results as well, and impact reports, or whatever it is that they're looking for in that kind of thing. What kind of piece are you showing growth in? And how do I incentivize that to my stakeholders and use that as to their benefit as well? So creating those two-way streets is a huge piece. So what does that look like for, let's say, a club, right? What does that look like for, a smaller organization, right? We have to show them what they're doing, or in those kind of student athletes. And that's really that point, right? Show them what they're doing that they can be a part of, and bring that to them, and really see, not necessarily, is it just the sports? Is there a community outreach piece? Is there a kind of community give back, and that social purpose aspect that they can start doing? Tim, do you have anything to add on there?
I do. Actually, it's a question. When you look at the social purpose, and you take social purpose in a community, and then you take partners. So it sounds like what you're saying is that in order to develop social purpose, that these partners are maybe transactional and short term, but a donor helps to sustain the program longer term. But you almost have to start with a partner, show success, take that success to a donor who's going to help you give a longer term impact and sustainability than a partner who may be transactional, may be short term. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a way. I think the one thing too that I would I would specify is saying, yeah, donors definitely create that sustainability piece. No doubt that money helps drive, sustainable organizations. But, in partnerships, it's not necessarily going to be just that, one and done piece, right? We want to create partnerships that are long lasting, that, come back to the table because they realize the benefit that you bring to the community. They realize the benefit that you bring to their organization. Maybe it is building, playgrounds for kids. Maybe it's building these, urban gardens for the youth that don't have access to, vegetables. What can your organization do for them that provide them that support and provide the rest of the community support? And they realize, hey, your name's on this, right? Maybe I want to be a part of this community that's doing something for me, right? A lot of those people that are in the community, like you said, are very transactional, right? If you do this for me, I'll do this for you, or I'll join in your team, or I'll play a part of your organization because you did this for me. But when you think about partners, what does that look like? What impact are you bringing to the community that will in turn help bolster both of your perceptions and perspectives of what you are doing for the community?
It also seems that that in this world where there's a lot of causes that people can give to, you have to create something that is definable and defensible. It says, here's what we do that's different. Here's what we do that's going to be impactful in this local or regional, depending on how big your organization is. But you have to be able to prove this authenticity and prove the differences in order to be able to sustain this and get donors to give year after year or even time after time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the unique part about that is you do have to separate yourself, right? You don't want to do the same thing over and over, or you don't want to do the same thing somebody else is doing, right? Like that's why I think creating these unique partnerships are almost more important than just saying we're going to do this for the community, or we're just going to do like a street cleanup. Those are all important things. But when you create these unique partnerships, working with, chambers, the Rotary clubs, geologists, and, the weirder, the better almost, because they always have some sort of creative plan too. And how can we address some of those other issues as a, unique sport organization? So using people that will continue to drive the community and will continue to drive those creative thought processes of like, how can we help solve these problems in the community? How can we help, solve the hunger or the homeless issue and provide support for them? So which organizations do that, right? Think outside the box and not necessarily only within that sport organization piece, right? I think oftentimes when we're thinking about sports or schools or anything like that, we think solely who's going to support education or who's going to support sports. And that sometimes puts us in that, or pigeonholes us into that thought process of like, this is a sport organization that only cares about sports. But if we want to give back to the local community, if we want to give back regionally, who are the ones doing the work there? Who are the ones doing the work regionally that are doing some give back in that social purpose aspect that we can partner with to do something else and really kind of be creative with how you address some of those issues? I think that's a really good point and a really good, plan to think about those and broaden that outreach that you planned.
Well, the one thing you mentioned, you have mentioned before, is that what people learn in sports is something that they carry with them throughout, something they take back to their community. And some of that is time management, because it takes time to be an athlete in addition to doing your homework and doing all these other things. It also takes an appreciation of teamwork and how do you, sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. And in addition to that is understanding who's a good leader and who isn't. So these are aspects that you have through this, that you can see what donors are doing. You can see what partners are doing. You can see how it affects donors. And that way, what you can explain to people is how this organization is going to benefit the community long-term because of these other things that people learn, and they can only really learn them through sports.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of those things that we talk about, and we'll get to, later in this clinic, is, what are those skills, and what are those skills that we can take away from, not only the sports aspect, but how can we really apply them in almost every other parts of our own life, and not just like organizational. But yeah, I definitely agree, and I think we'll definitely hit on that here coming up in a second. So we kind of already mentioned this, but creating that two-way street, right, is so important when you're creating these partnerships. And, you want to be, I want to be, say, vigilant, right? When you're doing this ask. I think when Tim and I were kind of talking about this before, is oftentimes we say, if we hear a no once, okay, let's try again. You're not going to go and watch a commercial and see something on TV and just be like, oh, well, that's going to solve all my problems. It's over and over again. You get that repetition. You get that kind of sense of, oh, I'm missing out if I don't participate, or I'm missing out if I don't see this. So being in somebody's ear, just kind of sharing some of those marketing aspects, sharing some of those tidbits of information, calling them again, seeing where they're at. If they say no the first time, that may not mean no, 6 months down the road. So you got to keep trying. You got to keep making sure that you're vigilant and diligent with your communication and your outreach. And I think if you think this is going to be a great partner, tell them why. Be transparent and show them, what you're doing, your data, whatever you need to do in order for them to hop on board and kind of jump in, right? I think the one piece that we look at is, how do we engage partners? Like we had at this organization, at MSL, we often have a partnership breakfast, right? And we've had student athletes or students cater it. And so they use their skills and that they were working on throughout school to, serve, to cook, to prepare all this stuff, to see that they're learning these life skills, not only in school, but their organizations and after school programs, whatever it is, the student athletes lead it, right? Nobody wants to hear from organizational leaders all the time, telling them how good the things that we're doing. You need to show them, right? You need to be student athlete driven, and you need to show them that they're creating the impact themselves and they're leading that charge of how they want to see their community. And you have to give them that autonomy to do so, right? So as an organizational leader, you have to kind of take a step back and say, what are the goals of our organization? And how can we really empower that and take those steps to get there with the student athletes or the athletes leading the charge? One of the things too is when we do partnership breakfasts, we also have whoever kind of just jumps in and wants to be a part of it. We have this orientation, right? Because partnership looks different for a lot of different people. So sometimes it's just, that expertise and those conversations that you have, and maybe it's a strategic building, but these partnerships that maybe the community is involved in, maybe the student athletes are more involved in, those are going to be a little bit different, right? Oftentimes we expect our partners to come in and talk about something, but they have no idea how to relate to student athletes. Maybe they were never one, or they just don't know how to communicate effectively to teens these days, or Gen Z or millennials or whatever it may be. We have to almost coach them into that position, right? If we're going to bring in guest speakers, if we're going to bring in people talking about financials and whatnot, or what the recruiting process looks like, how can we get them to partner with us in a different way, so then they know this is what the expectation is. This is what we'd like for them to do. And then what can they provide us beyond that? So having those kind of conversations before and kind of outright gives you that sense of transparency and shows the organization that you know what you're talking about when it comes to, student athlete development and success for them, and what it looks like for them to really engage with the student athlete of tomorrow or Gen Z or whatever it is. And I think that's the important factor, is they need to feel confident that you know what you're doing as well. One of those things that we do when we have these partnership breakfasts or partnership kind of orientation pieces is we allow them to ask all the questions that they can, right? We give them scenarios, we give them, different conversational pieces that these students can do, or these student athletes have done in the past. And then they bring their own ideas to the table. What else can they provide? What else can they do? Because they want to be, back into it. So we tag them in social media, we tag them and grow their brand based off of their, interest in that as well. And a lot of times it's, the student athletes posting their things on social media that it's growing their brand as well. So it's not necessarily just, the main organization's social media page posting it. It's the student athletes kind of tagging them as well. So building that kind of organic following and saying like, hey, they came out and supported us today. This was awesome. I got this great highlight, or I got this great clip in there, and you can retweet it or, regram it, whatever it is. And it's free marketing, right? So it's a huge push for for social media. And I think that's something that we always often overlook is the power that social media has that student athletes really only engage with, and that's where they get most of their content from. They're not on watching cable TV or cable news anymore. They're on social media trying to figure out what's cool, what's hip, who's talking, what are they talking about, and so on.
So Davis, when you look at this and you're the coach or the sponsor of whatever the organization is, would you strongly encourage the leader, the coach, to get his kids involved to help write the content and then bring it to you and make sure that it's audience appropriate? Would that be a great way to get both the kids and perhaps the supporters involved in the organization so that you can continue this long-term promotion of what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you're trying to get a unique voice out there, right? You don't want somebody that's a coach or has been around for a while to speak to the organization. You want the student athletes to speak to it, right? You want the people that are most impacted by it to speak to it. And I think bringing their voice to the table is something more important than, what we can offer. And I think being able to give them that leadership or that kind of empower them to do so and step up and say, hey, look at what we did at practice today, right? Thanks to so-and-so, this is huge, right? And so being able to identify those partners, those donors, those, that idea of what they did and make it real, make it organic and say, engage them in the way that a 12-year-old would, right? And it's crazy to see how many 12-year-olds have cell phone, that have Snapchat, that want to be on social media all the time anyway, but they're putting content out constantly because they think that that's important to them. So, and it is. And so we can't discredit that, even though it may not have that direct link to just increased revenue, but it has that direct link to increased engagement and where you're building that brand. So I think that's the huge aspect. And I think when you brought that up, Tim, it's giving that autonomy to our student athletes is what we really need to start doing more of, just to help build a brand and help build, our social media following and so on, because they're better at it than any of us could ever dream of at this point. So one thing that we're gonna do real quick is watch this quick clip, and I'll share this clip with you because I think it's really important. It's from the British Council, but it's also about your organization, right? And I want you to watch it first, and then we'll kind of talk about it afterwards.
Why are similar businesses closely located to one another? It might seem odd that similar businesses, such as shoemakers or butchers, would set up in the same location. Wouldn't they just be competing with one another? The answer is yes and no. Even when a city's economy changes over time, the clustering of businesses remains common. In London, for example, you can see the city's history as a trading hub in street names such as Poultry, Milk Street and Bread Street. These areas were named after the produce originally sold there in the 16th century. As large-scale manufacture and trade declined in London, different industries took their place. The deregulation of financial markets in 1986 turned parts of the city into finance districts, where banks and brokerage firms sprang up close together. Clustering is common because it brings advantages. Businesses can share costs, skills, and infrastructure. They are likely to learn from one another, and despite competition, they can pool their efforts to seek support or investment. Quantifying the exact benefits of clustering is notoriously difficult, but we can say that cities with a high concentration of well-educated employees have grown at a faster rate than comparable cities with a less skilled population. The main drawback is that these benefits may only apply to some people, while others are left out. Without consistent planning and discussion between those involved in building these clusters, isolated enclaves can start to form, complete with dedicated transport and housing for skilled workers above a certain income. The higher commercial rent can also push out smaller businesses. If such clusters are to truly benefit cities, they must do more than provide jobs and visit local schools. They must also think about how everyone experiences the impact of a changing economy on their city. For more on knowledge-based businesses and cities, read Kat Hanna's article on British Council Voices and watch the other videos in this series.
So one of those cool things that I thought about during this video and why I'm sharing it with you is oftentimes we take for granted the community that surrounds us, right? We think sometimes of it as competition or other teams and organizations within our area as competition. Yes, that's true, but it's also driving us to be more successful, right? What are we doing that's more unique than the other organization? What can we do that's going to bring in a different partner or a more unique partner than that other organization? So when it comes to developing these partnerships and these kind of connections to our community, how can we be different? Right? We're not just expecting people to give us money because we're, a sports organization and we, take care of student athletes. What are we doing that's different? How can we drive social purpose, and how can we give back to that community that supported us so well? Right? And I think when you look at who's in your surrounding area, as concussions become a more prevalent thing in sports, could you partner with, a doctor that focuses and specializes, or an athletic trainer that specializes in concussion therapy? How can we prevent these things? How can we become more knowledgeable about these things? How can we have them talk about the side effects and what to look out for when you go through a concussion? I know myself have been through a lot of concussions, in the past, and it has derailed my athletic career significantly, pretty much put it to an end. But at the same time, if we're more aware about it, if we're more aware of what's going on and the impacts that our community has and what positions are out there that we can really leverage, I think that's where we can become more powerful and more unique, is taking advantage of, shouldn't say taking advantage of, but really leveraging the stakeholders, the parents, the community members that are involved already in our organization, and use them to say, would you be willing to speak to our student athletes? Would you be willing to support, our organization in this way? And be specific with those asks. What can we do for you if you do this for us? And give them some data, give them some, information or insight on what you're seeing as a coach or as a, athletic director or as an admin. What does that look like? And I think that's the biggest piece, is making sure that we leverage the community around us and drive that unique partnership, or those unique partnerships, and use that as a driving force to create competition within your own organization for yourself. So I think that's a pretty powerful video in terms of just getting that kind of explanation out there. Tim, is there anything that you wanted to add? Or
I think the thing that I would add to that is maybe just more of a follow-on. I believe that when you look at the clustering, you also look at where your school is. You have a cluster. Generally, you have a group of small shops nearby because they like to be near schools. They like to be near high traffic areas. This also gives you an instant place to start your partnerships. You can partner with people that are close by. You can partner with the local Dairy Queen or the local grocery store, because these are people that are going to help sponsor what you're doing, and they're going to be directly impacted by that, because the people that come out of the programs are going to be people that are going to look to work in that grocery store or work in that local shop, so that the things that you're doing prepare that student athlete to be able to have a community that he or she can go to as soon as they do graduate, and they can say, hey, you supported us here, and now I want to pay back by getting a job with you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that brings up, kind of that really drives that, who should we partner with, right? And I think sometimes what you said, like, there's a Dairy Queen around the corner, right? Is that going to be the best partner or donor? I mean, absolutely, depending on what you want out of that relationship, right? And I think sometimes some organizations aren't worth a yes because they want to either exploit the student athletes or give them and feed them different things, because a lot of times we think about different areas, right? And they don't have those healthy options, right? Do we want our student athletes to go and get Dairy Queen or whatever right after a practice or right after a game? Not necessarily. We want them to live those healthy lives that we continue to promote, but at the same time, it's okay to have that, it's okay to have that balance, and it's okay to do that. So I think what we're trying to do is making sure that we're very cognizant of these partnerships and why we're having them. What's the strategic vision for them, and what community value does it bring, right? So if it is to, bring in, after a match or after a game or after a kind of, I guess, like a competition, is it good to, have the community go and be at the local Dairy Queen? That would be awesome, right? That would be such a nice community event for people to kind of participate in and share and really ideate behind that. But if we're to say, like, we want something to be on the regular, do we want to partner with some, like a health food store or a GNC where we can get more vitamins or whatever it is that promotes that healthy lifestyle and really that well-being? Then yes, let's find out how we can partner with those people. How can we partner with, these organic farmers or these, these non-traditional kind of artisan shops that maybe are looking for some other marketing, and how can these, student athletes support them in that outreach? So I think when it comes to those conversations, it's yes, and what can we do for you? These informal organizations and these informal type things, they're often, more flexible than if you were to approach, a large organization, because they have such strict guidelines in how to partner with sports organizations. So if you go to a Dick's Sporting Goods, or if you go to, a museum, or if you go to, these larger outfitters, they're going to be very strict in how they engage with all the stakeholders or you itself. So, but if you go to these smaller partners or these smaller, mom and pop shops, that they're going to be a little bit more flexible. How can we help each other, and how can we build this community together? And I think that's what we have to continue to look back on is, what is it? What's the purpose, right? If it's revenue generation and if it's, sponsorship, then definitely go after some of those big ones, and you're gonna have to follow some of those strict guidelines. But if you want something more flexible to really stand apart from, different organizations, because you've partnered with this long-term institution that's been in your community for a while, then let's focus on the flexibility of that, and focusing on how can we uplift them as well as your organization by working with them.
So that shared goal, shared community can be leveraged by the local team to help amplify the impact you can have, because you do share a community, you do share some core values, and so as you go out into your community, you need to be able to say that to people, to say, hey, we share this neighborhood, we share these goals, and our students come work here. So you've got this shared experience that you can leverage in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, I put this picture in there for that reason, right? Like, love thy neighbor. These people around you are here to support you, and you need to figure out how you can support them in return, and vice versa. And I think it's making sure that you're aware of who's around and what they like to do. What does their, corporate social responsibility look like within even a small organization? Are they doing outreach? Are they doing, Friday night movie nights? How can we support them by providing more ample opportunities to engage with those Friday night movie nights? Like, what is it that they do and offer that we can start promoting to say, if you do this, we can say, go here on a Friday night, right? Or we can do, host an event on a Friday to bring in more attention, to say, hey, this actually exists. Let's go redo this. I know locally, we have a roller skating rink that seemed like it was dying in the early 2000s, but now it's booming because people got into roller skating because of social media. People love sharing their roller skating videos, and now almost every Friday or Saturday night, people are roller skating or rollerblading at the roller rink. Like, that was almost like a dying industry, but now it's kind of, around here, it's really interesting to see that kind of booming thing, because people want to get out of the house again after, this COVID situation. But at the same time, people completely kind of forgot about it. So what can we do to uplift these types of events or these types of organizations that are doing things to bring people together again, right? It's that community driven aspect. And what is your organization doing to drive that community aspect, right? It's maybe people forgot that ice rinks hold, free skate. Maybe they forgot that there's a basketball shoot around. Maybe they forgot that you can go play on the football field or run around the track, and play tag games, whatever it is. What can we do to kind of create those incentives or those activities that bring in the community to see what you're doing, see what impact that you're bringing to the community, and drive that engagement? So a lot of outreach and it's a lot of self-promotion, but it's going to attract a lot of different partners and a lot of different people from the community if you're able to know that show them that everybody's having fun, that they're doing a positive thing, and keeping that in a safe environment, right? I think there's a lot of different things when we look at our organizations. Is it safe? Is it, you know, a viable and sustainable model? Is it something that people are engaged with? And a lot of times that's what partners look for. And I want to kind of lean on you, Tim, is like, what would, if you were coming into an organization and you're looking to partner with them, or if they asked you to partner with them, what are those things that you would really look for?
That's a really good question. And I would answer it in two ways. Sometimes you're not looking for the cohesiveness of the community, you're looking for an additional community. So let's say that I'm a local running shop and I have my clientele, but half a block down, there's an art store. And that art store has products, the local artists put their products in there. Well, every once in a while, I can host a art night in my running stop, and I can invite customers of both companies to come look at the art that might be for sale, and my running customers or my running shop customers will see things that they might want to take home. In addition to that, the people from the art store are going to see things that they can come in, and they can buy for their walks, and they can buy for exercising, you know, taking their dog out, or even for their own running. So now you can take this cross-pollination in a small community and have one business that seems disparate from another, but bring them together, and each group gets to benefit by the population and the cohort that each one brings. So you can create these synergies in your own community by just looking around, by just being engaged and being aware. You can bring people together, bring the community together, and grow all the businesses as well as the awareness of your own company, your own team.
No, I love that. And I love those, like, you know, almost niche communities within the larger community, right? Like, you want to create that smaller feel because, you know, when it feels too broad, it's not connected, right? It almost seems disjointed and you're trying to force it. But I think sometimes when you kind of create those smaller communities within that, it can pay dividends. So, and I think that leads to our next point, right? Is that culture is the way you think, act, and interact, right? We're trying to drive that culture and try to drive that, you know, community aspect, right? We want to drive that culture of excellence, which means that we have that same mission, that vision and purpose, and everyone knows what those are, right? As a coach, as an admin, we're there to set the standard, but teams and the athletes and the student athletes and the parents are the ones that develop the culture. And I think we have to almost follow that lead, but also facilitate that lead, and how to get there is we have to show them, right? It's almost sometimes hand holding, but it's also, we're here to take you step by step, but then they feel more ingrained in that work. They helped develop that culture. They helped create this tradition. They helped create this kind of, you know, community that they didn't have before, right? So when you get into some of these, you know, basketball communities, these football communities, and so on, they are together, right? It's because these organizations have really developed, like, hey, parents are going to communicate on a regular basis. What are they talking about? How can we engage them with forums? How can we engage them with Q&A nights? How can we engage them, you know, with like back to sport nights, and just really engaging the community in different ways, and kind of almost creating these audits, right? What can we do better? How can we serve you better? And just really focusing on those pieces that will help you facilitate that culture to the next level, and just continue driving that voice and that choice for your student athletes and parents too. I mean, I think there's certain limits that we shouldn't, you know, break. We don't want to just open it up for a free fall where people are like a city hall and just start yelling. But at the same time, what are we facilitating in those discussions that are going to improve the next steps and improve the next generation of athletes that are coming through?
Well, Davis, another thing that I've seen coaches do, and that is, if you have a successful program at the high school, at some point shortly after the season, or even in the middle of the season, you will take your kids down to the junior high and introduce them. So now, because the junior high kids look up to the high school kids, those are their idols. Those are the people that they're looking up to, and they want to be them. So when you have this culture at the high school, it's up to you to take it to the junior high and to the middle school, and to show them what's going on, show them what they can be part of, because then it creates additional energy at that junior high level. So they want to be part of this culture when they get there. And once they do, they're already predisposed to this culture of success. But you use your athletes as your best marketing people. Those are influencers at that junior high level, and don't be afraid to go downstream because you're feeding your own team.
Oh, absolutely. It's like creating that talent pipeline, but it's also that systematic mentorship, right? You're trying to continue that leadership, those leadership skills, not only developing those within your players, but this next generation too. And I think if you create those opportunities, right, it's not only going to feed from the bottom and the student athletes, but think about the coaches and the people involved, right? If you're setting your example as you need to be a mentor as well, right? And all these other coaches need to be mentors to the assistant coaches and vice versa. So then they can continue working up those talent pipelines and really focusing on their growth as people. But then you see from an outsider perspective, right? They're going to see that as this community cares about itself. This community cares about each other. They care about how they're growing together collectively. And people want to invest in a collective group. They want to invest in people that care for one another and not just because they're successful. This is what success will look like, or success will happen if you have these types of things. So that's when you start really engaging those outside kind of partners and organizations. If they start seeing that, they start seeing the community aspect driving the train essentially. And one of the things that really lead to that is, some of you may be familiar with this, but Simon Sinek, right? He's, a world-renowned author and speaker, and a basis for a lot of the work that we do. And I think what he does is explain, the values for each organization very well, right? There's a lot of people that can tell you the what of an organization and what they do. They can tell you how they do it, but oftentimes where they get stuck is that why. Right? People don't care really about what they do and how they do it, but they care about the why you do it. And I think, some organizations and individuals know how and what they do, and hows are meant to communicate what makes us special or sets us apart from other organizations, and hows are an organization and individual strengths, values, and guiding principles, right? And we can often talk about the what, right? Here's a product, here's our sport, right? Here's our athletic community. But why are you there? Why are you doing this? Why are sports important to your community? Why are sports important to this school or this organization? Why are the student athletes? Continue that kind of why tree where you just continue to asking, whys. And we usually give the example of ask 5 whys before you kind of come to those root causes, right? You find out who you are as an organization by continuing this process. Why do you do what you're doing? And I think that's the trick, is you have to understand your own why. Why are you in this position before you can address it for an organization? So continue to ask yourself, why did you volunteer to coach? Why are you, in this position right now? And really think critically about this, because it'll help drive your mission, your vision, and your future as you think about how to implement those same things throughout your organization, right? You all want to be transparent. You all want to have that same mission and vision. And that helps your hiring process. That helps your partnership process. That helps all these things, if you can clearly state all these things, right? But the why is the most meaningful aspect of it. So it's a difficult task, but when we talk about it, a lot of times we have to really enunciate and really show the purpose of why we do this as well. So this is kind of the example for MindSpark Learning, right? Our why is to ensure a sustainable economy while mobilizing a workforce that is capable of tackling the complex problems of the unforeseeable future. And we do that through education, through professional development, indirectly through our students. And our what is designed for professional learning experiences like we're doing today. And so we know that this is going to change the world. We know that this is going to create a big impact, but our why is really driving our next generation of workforce and our next generation of the economy, and thinking about how they become problem solvers for things that, a lot of careers that don't exist, a lot of problems that don't exist, right? Who could have predicted, we'd be coming out of the 1.5 year long pandemic at this current stage? How are we going to solve the problems for this next time? What is going to happen? So being able to identify some of these things and those root causes all stem from that education, all stem from our goal and what we're trying to achieve as an organization as well.
Davis, I would just add one carry on to that, and that is today's athlete doesn't do things because you said so.
Mm.
It's not like sit down, shut up, and listen. The era of that has passed, and a lot of the kids will do the work or do the drills, they'll do whatever it is, as long as you can give them why are we doing this, and which goes in once you say why we're doing it, is how is it going to help me improve, and what is my expected result. So by taking an extra minute to explain the why, and the why isn't just the whole organization, the why is sometimes more granular than that. So if you can explain the why that gets to the how, that illustrates the what, you're going to have a better team, and you're going to develop that culture of excellence long term by just taking an extra minute.
Absolutely. And it's a simple question, right? Like, we often don't ask ourselves because we often overlook it. We expect people to buy our what or our how, but never really exasperate or kind of elaborate on our why. And I think that's what really drives that passion, those emotional responses to your organization, is by creating that why, and that sentiment that people can really relate to is that why. So I am passionate about education. I'm going to work for a company that works with education, and that is partially my why of being here. But that's exactly what we have to do as an organization as well, to continue to develop and continue to reiterate. So that helps drive that value proposition, right? If we understand our what, our how, and our why, what is now our unique value proposition, right? So here's kind of like the categories that we really focus on is, why would somebody want to work with you? Why would a partner care about us? What is a really powerful value propositions that we can offer them that really show them what we do and why we do it? So kind of my challenge to you in the time that we, after we get sign off here, is find an organization that's not yours and vet their value proposition. Like, give feedback if they were a potential partner. Write it down, sound it out. Don't really just be nice to somebody and just to say this organization's got a great value proposition. Tell me more about it. Like, why is it capturing your attention? Is this something that you can kind of speak to or understand and say, do you really do this, or is it something you question, right? So what problems can your student athletes help you solve, right? I think when you think about the value proposition, is where is the voice of your student athlete? Where's the voice of your coaches? Where's the voice of your stakeholders? And I think when we look as partners, that's what we look for, right? How much autonomy does the organization have, and how sustainable is that model, right? It's not always just top-down leadership that really sticks out, because yeah, you can have a strong leader, but that's not going to change the whole organization, right? That can change aspects of it, but it's not going to change how team dynamics are, how student athletes, how successful they are in the future, and so on. We have to have that commitment and that value, and what's unique to our organization as a whole that separates us for partners. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do over the next minute or so is really think about who your partners and who you want them to be. Think about hyper-local, think about your community, your regional partners, and even nationally, right? This could be anybody. Right? I want you to brainstorm, write as many potential partnerships down as you possibly can. And I think the idea behind this is to be as weird and as creative as possible, right? Think outside of your normal sports network. Think outside of just that traditional model of what sponsorships normally look like. Is it just like a pizza place? Is it just a local place like that? Or a tire company? You can travel. Think about what other areas and sectors could you get and could you go after to help support your why. So I'll give you a minute to do so. Brainstorm or brain to storm and go for it. Okay, so hopefully everybody's got some partnership down that they're going to go after this session right away, I expect. But hopefully you've got something that's, some more safe and traditional ones, but also some ones that are completely out there, ones that you were just thinking of, maybe friends work there, or a different partner, or a family member or a family that's participating in your organization. They have connections. Leverage what you have and the resources that you have available. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this section. The next part is really when you do think about those partners, not only do you have your value proposition ready, what are you going to do for them and what makes you unique, but now what is your why, right? What makes you unique? Why would they want to work with you? Or why would they want to donate to you if you're looking for a sponsor or donor? And what do you bring to the community? And why does the community need you? So when you develop your own pitch, think about these things, right? And it can't just be once. It has to be consistent. It has to be, reflected upon and revised on a consistent basis. If it's not meeting the needs of the community, what are you doing to change? What are you doing to evolve with the community needs? I want you to focus on growth and impact. And in terms of coaching, think about what worked and what didn't in the past. Change what needs to be changed and fail fast and pivot. So what are you doing to consistently promote what you're doing? How are you bringing people in? How are you showing and being on social media? What are your student athletes doing and providing for your organization? And how can you train them up to do so? What is that consistent voice that coaches are speaking to? And how are they reaching out to the community members and community partners? So thinking about all these different aspects of what your pitch could be and really take that into consideration, because you do create this new sustainable model. After COVID and after what has done to our sports organizations, we really need to reimagine what sports sponsorship looks like, because we need to create a more sustainable model that will help us last through something more drastic or dramatic even. And I think that's the hardest thing, is continuing these conversations when we have the expectation and we have that traditional model of partnerships, but not necessarily are we challenging that status quo. And that's what we really need to start doing in order to be sustainable in the future. So next steps before we kind of start closing up is go out there, do the work, right? There's nobody else going to do it for you, right? You need to network at every opportunity and give back to the community that supports you, right? Where are you getting your student athletes from? It's that community. So how are you going to give back to them? Are you going to go out and do that social purpose work? Are you going to go back and do clothing drives? Are you going to do, something for the homeless or feed the needy? What are those things that you can drive that social engagement and that social purpose piece of your organization? The more that you care about your community, the more the community will care about you. And I think that's a big driver of why we do what we do. And that's one of our main pillars of MSL Capita, is that social purpose aspect. So I'm going to leave you with this short clip before we kind of talk about some other aspects and some self-promotion, but thinking about this kind of thing, what Hellmann's did in Canada. So we'll start this.
4 million Canadians go hungry every year. People like Anne, battling cancer, and Gladys and her 2 children. But every minute, Canada wastes enough food to feed a stadium. So, 2 days ago, we collected food that would have been thrown out from local grocery stores. And today, we fed that food to this stadium. Hellmann's and MLSE are proud to announce a new partnership. After stadium events, we'll collect the leftover food and give it to those in need. Each year, we'll donate 50,000 meals to the volunteers, the families, and friends who need it most. That's more real food for more real people. Learn more at realfoodrescue.ca.
So just thinking about that video, that social purpose aspect was huge. They did it in a dramatic fashion. They caught people's attention, and they realized what they were doing and how it can definitely change and alter a lot of people's lives. And I think that's a huge driver, right? Like, how do you get that emotional attachment to the work and to that social purpose aspect of things? Tim, is there anything you want to mention?
The only thing I would say is just a reminder, and just to sort of coalesce some of the thoughts that you brought up and articulated so well. And that is, as you're coaching a team, whether it's a club sport or whether it's a through the public schools, you have to remember that you are not disassociated from your community, that you have to be part of the community, and you have to work at being part of the community. You have to take the first step, and the community will take 2 steps in your direction. But it's really important that you make sure that the community knows what you're doing. And as David said earlier, here's what we can do for you. And now here's what we want you to do for us. And part of that is volunteering or donating or just coming and sitting in the stands. But you have to show that it's this two-way street, because if you don't take a step in their direction, as it says here, if you don't do it, who is going to?
Absolutely. I love that. So thank you again. We do have some clinics again coming up. So please check our website at mindspark.org/clinics. We'd love for you guys to join us for some other ones coming up here in the future. And again, one of our larger engagements here as well coming up in September, mid-September, please join us for our collab launch. It is a fee, but we definitely have some great partners, some sponsors, as well as some people that are really going to engage in some really heavy and deep work within their organization. So we highly suggest checking out our collab. It's a 6-month program, and it's here to uplift and empower women in leadership roles. So please check that out. It's on our webpage. There's a lot more information there. So if you're interested, always feel free to email at davis@mindspark.org, and we're happy to answer any questions or jump on a call and get more involved. But again, thank you, and we're excited for what's next. So thank you guys. Take care.